We've been gone a little while, so glad to be back. Um, I'm not going to do super long today, but I did want to come on and do a stream because it's one of my favorite things to do. It's a little bit easier to prep after you do them. You know, when you're loading on different platforms, these are much easier to do because I don't gotta I don't gotta do too much with them. So, all right, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about inside versus outside alignment and why our journey feels like it gets harder as we go. And when we feel like it should get easier as we go. You know, this journey should not get tougher and tougher and tougher as we go. It should get easier. And when we start the journey, we talked about third dimension, fourth dimension, fifth dimension. And then we go on from the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension is not the end, it is the beginning of our soul aligned reality. It's not the end. A lot of people paint that as the end. You know, the fifth dimension is the end. It can be the end of certain parts of your human experience, but it's not the end of the whole human experience because you still got to clean up your human experience, if that makes sense. You can stop participating in certain things and creating more human experiences, more karma to clean up. But you got to clean up what we already, you know, we got to clean up the mess we made and try not to make other messes. And that's where it gets confusing. And that's where we kind of start to throw our hands up and we're like, okay, I don't even know what to do with that. I don't know what to do with that. I'm going to put that one over there because I don't know what to do with it. Do I try to fix it? Do I try to align it? Do I walk away from it? What do I do with it? Let me put a pin in it and we'll come back to it. So when we start off in our human consciousness, and if you go back to when you were just completely unconscious, just living from your human beliefs, you know, not really, and that's can be a little wishy-washy because some people just are a little more conscious than other people when they never really lost what we have as children in a way. You know, we all come in as children just more conscious. And it kind of gets whittled down with us over time by our parents, by our surroundings. But, you know, we signed up for that. So it's not that that was a cruel thing to do. We agreed to go to sleep and wake back up later. And that's just what we agreed to do. So for a lot of us, we will kind of see where it looks like some people just are a little more connected. You know, you had your people who were into spirit world. They were into crystals. They were into, you know, they were into astrology. They were into all this more metaphysical stuff. And maybe you're one that was kind of into that stuff. Maybe you never were. Or maybe they're really into just the stars and the planets and alien conspiracies. And it doesn't matter really where you, even if you're into religion and spirit world in that sense, and angels, and, you know, even if you want to go demons, whatever. It was just something not explainable by human consciousness. And so that's really all that fourth dimensional consciousness we talk about when you kind of step into this metaphysical, I don't have a human reason that just happened. You know, I don't know why that just happened. That is when we start getting into fourth dimension. You're kind of starting to believe in other things. You're starting to shift a little bit. You know, you're starting to, it is that catch-22, kind of everything's lumped in there. Channeling's lumped in there. When you're really in that seeking phase of consciousness, you're really looking for high content material. You can throw the book The Secret in there, the Seth books in there. You can throw kind of all the hybrid human consciousness, metaphysical, spirit world, mediumship, all this stuff kind of goes into that fourth dimensional phase, right? And we can spend a lot of time there. Some people never leave there. Some people stay there a long time because, especially if they have branded themselves as that, if you've branded yourselves a medium, if you've branded yourselves, I'll even throw tarot cards in there, all these spirit guides, all that kind of stuff. Once you kind of brand yourself in that, a lot of people don't want to leave that because that's how their money comes in, through that type of content. So leaving it behind means they got to shift everything. Because a lot of us will kind of go through that phase, but we don't stay in that phase. Because we see that it's just other aspects of us. It's nothing to be mesmerized by. It's just us doing all this stuff. Deja vu, the dream world. To me, opening up to the dream world is a big fourth dimensional consciousness thing. Opening up to be able to, you know, predict the future and dream the future, which we all do. And we just dream different frequencies and what's going on in those frequencies. We deem it the future because we're not experiencing it. If we're not experiencing if you're not experiencing it, then it's the future. It's not the here and now. So we go through all these phases, and then when you get, a lot of times we'll pull away from what we know in human consciousness. It's kind of like we start extracting from. Sometimes we'll quit jobs in that phase. We'll try to find other ways to make money. We will look at different ways to support ourselves. Sometimes our universe will bring in other things to support ourselves that we never thought of we could use to support ourselves. We might be in relationships that support us. We might be in relationships where we're supporting other people, but maybe not with money. There's a lot of room in this phase, and a lot of years in this phase. You can think you're out of this phase way, 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 way before you get out of it, okay? Because we start touching the consciousness so much. We think we're so far ahead because we're just touching that consciousness. We're getting exposed to the consciousness. We can feel that higher consciousness. We can understand a lot more. Our gifts start to open up. Telepathy, if you want to call it, humans call it telepathy. I'm more like reading the field. Some people call it ESP. Clairaudience, clairvoyance, all that stuff starts opening up, and we feel like we know it all, we see it all. But we still have a very fragmented sense, and we're still kind of living from our human aspect, but experiencing higher consciousness. And that's kind of when you're in that fourth dimensional phase, right? You're still have a lot of feet in the human world, but exploring higher consciousness. You're touching on it, you're expanding your consciousness. You're seeing different things. Your relationships might be enhanced. They might be changing and shifting into higher consciousness relationships. You're starting to really be more accountable for what you're putting out. You can into positive energy, good vibrations, all those buzzwords that came along with fourth dimensional when people hit that phase. The energy is something, it's something to it. It's not just all muck, and it's not something we made up. Law of attraction, that falls into, all of those things, all the cosmic laws, in a sense, fall into that dimension. Well, from a higher dimension, but we're still bringing it down and we bastardize it into trying to improve our human experience. And that's why a lot of this stuff got kind of bastardized, because it was never to improve our human experience, but we wouldn't even be looking at it if we didn't think it could, because that's the life we have. We're not looking at creating something new. We're trying to fix what we've already created because we're not happy with it. So we're kind of trying to throw paint on it. We're trying to fix the legs on a piece of furniture, that maybe will never stand up straight, but let me just try to put this book under it and see if I can level it out a little bit. We're trying to make that marriage work. We're trying to make that job work. We're trying to make it work, trying to using other things. We used to hear the term energy vampires all the time. That was a big term back 10 years ago. I don't know if you hear it much anymore, but putting yourself in a protective bubble and all those kind of things we would use to kind of be able to be in unaligned situations longer. Because we didn't know how to align them, and we didn't know we were supposed to leave them yet. We're just trying to make what we have work using other metaphysical tools, And as I said, I think I said earlier, I would throw religion in there too, because that is just another spiritual avenue some people went. Some people didn't go that way. Some people were strict atheists. But they open up to some of that type of stuff, even if it's just Christ energy, God particles, Buddha, you open up to something with it, because it is a Christed consciousness, higher consciousness frequency you're going to touch on, until you can bring it down. So we start off trying to align our inner world, trying to find inner peace, meditation is a big thing here. You'll be in a lot of meditation. You'll be in a lot of these guided meditations. You might be taking a lot of courses in this phase. You're trying to find peace within. And you're trying to find joy and bliss and magic in your everyday life. You're trying to just connect inside, because we're so disconnected inside. That's why so many people have a harder time when the days are shorter, because you don't get the sunlight. And they're still depending on the external light. When we're in that phase, we're all dependent on that external light to brighten our day. And you'll notice the farther you go along with ascension, it doesn't bother you anymore, because your internal light's so much brighter. You're fueled on your internal light. You're not using the external to fuel you anymore. And when we're in those, we use a lot of the external stuff to fuel us in those phases. And you kind of start to get out of that. You kind of start to You know, the higher your frequency goes, the more you can embody that frequency. You start to move on from that, and all of a sudden you're not stuck with the external trying to fuel you. You're pulling away from that stuff. And you're working on your own internal connection, your own, how your universe communicates with you. You start to decode your matrix. I did so many videos on decoding our matrix years ago. Looking at the signs, you know, because all those signs were always there. We just didn't know where to look for them. We couldn't read the code. You know, we couldn't read the code. We couldn't read the sign. So we kind of felt very disconnected from the realities. You didn't realize we were creating them. And there's still not a lot of accountability when we get to even the fifth dimension, where we're so high. People will call it high on light, high on your soul, you know, high on bliss and magic and love and light, and everything's beautiful and everything's wonderful, and you just feel so much of that inside of you coming out. And because you've never felt it, it feels like it's this life-changing connection you've made, right? And that's when we really are aligning ourselves and aligning our inner world. And it's a beautiful phase. You spend a lot of time by yourself, a lot of time out in nature. You spend a lot of time, and you'll find your time out in nature will dwindle as you go, because you've embodied so much of it that you actually become a frequency higher than nature, and you don't need to be out in it anymore. You know, you will go out to maybe support nature instead of letting it support you. You know, you might start a project to assist nature, and you're not just using it to, I don't want to say take from nature, because it is an agreement nature made to assist us with our ascension process. But you want to give back to it. You know, you want to go out and do things to assist her. Assist the trees, plant trees, whatever that is. So when we're in that inner reorganization, we start to look at, how do I feel about myself? Why do I feel that way? We haven't made the connection yet to, even though we've read it, and even though people might tell us, we haven't made the connection between our inner programming and how it projects in our outer world. How we created all these realities from that inner programming. We haven't made that connection yet. We're still kind of just trying to find that connection within ourselves. Hone in on our skills, you know, be able to see, you know, how will that reality come out? You know, being able to really kind of just look at how we feel. And we're really not taking too much into account about how other people feel at that point. It can be kind of looked at as a very selfish phase, and there are parts of it when it can be kind of go a little selfish. I've done videos on that also, I think, about when, you know, self-care becomes like selfish, you know. When we start to discount everyone else in our reality, we stop showing up for things we said we show up for because, you know, it's just too much, or the energies are too high, or whatever. Even though we know we signed up to do it. And we're supposed to show up to do it, or we're leaving we don't screw other people over for our own benefit. And yeah, could it happen once? Maybe we have to let someone down, but we learn very quickly not to do that. And if we're repeatedly doing it, we're kind of learning that, oh, you know, stop doing that, because you're letting down the whole reality when you're not showing up, because you might not be listening to your inner guidance that don't commit to these things, because you're not going to be able to show up for them. You know, but it's not the same third dimensional not really showing up, because in our human consciousness, we never really showed up for anybody. You know, I can remember this story someone would tell. It was actually, they tell it around Christmas, you know, where they would be invited to all these parties, right? And they would just show up. They'd have 20 minutes. They'd go in. They'd either, if they were driving, you know, maybe they drank a little bit. This is a different time. You know, it wasn't as much on the drinking and driving as it is now, but you know, eat a cookie, eat something, and then leave in 20 minutes and go to the next party. And it showed when they showed up. They were just checking a box. You know, they didn't really want to be there. They were just checking a box, say, oh yeah, I went. But they didn't want to be in those realities, and that was a lot of our human realities. You know, we didn't want to be there. We kind of would set up a game, check a box to be there. And keep going. There's so many birds outside today. And there is a little killer cat out there. Any minute now, you guys are going to see the circle of life, and that cat springs up and grabs one of these birds. Just a fair warning on that. In case anybody sees that carnage that's probably about to take place out there. So anyway, sorry. I was just getting distracted by the birds and wondering where the cat was. I was like, any minute now, you're going to see a cat come up and pull that bird right out of the sky, which is what kind of starts happening to us. So we go through a lot of, it's almost like an intermission. You know, it doesn't feel like an intermission, but it is in a way an intermission. We go from human consciousness, we have this transitionary period where we're kind of in both worlds. We get plopped into the fifth dimension when we always kind of oscillate between three. You do 3, 4, and 5, 4, 5, and 6. You know, 6, 7, and 8. You're kind of going to be oscillating between the three. Your consciousness can be 15, 15 above that. But you haven't anchored that in yet. You haven't bought that down, meaning you're living from that consciousness, meaning everything in your world has to be aligned to that. That's why things start to get harder. And you can tell that when you're with someone who hasn't had to realign anything yet. And it's not that they are inferior or they haven't done the journey. They're just not in that part of the journey. They're still into their own self-discovery, their inner connection phase, because you can't move on to the next phase unless you have your inner connection. You've invoked these abilities. You're starting to see through the human beliefs and how they're not true, and you're starting to bring down this consciousness and embody it. Embody the consciousness means you have to align your world to it. And that's when the outer alignment comes in. That's when it starts to get harder. The inner alignment feels more of the bliss and magic, and it can be an isolated time. You have a lot of stuff coming up in that time because it can feel isolated when you're so used to the external world kind of running you and you being the drama of the outer world, and the excitement of the outer world and the sexiness sometimes of the outer world. And when you played in that, and then you can't really play it in anymore, it's not really as fun as it used to be, but you're not really comfortable inside either. And you kind of remember when I was in this phase, I was at a job and I was working at home a lot. And I was home a lot. And I was like, God, I'm so bored. I don't want to be really home because the vibration in the house would sometimes feel too high because I had put a lot of crystals in. At that point, I think it was just crystals. I didn't have Andars yet. Tarot card. I was into all this stuff, listening to all this stuff. So I was really much into that hitting that consciousness, the seeker phase, because the only way to change our consciousness and start to rewrite our DNA and activate our consciousness, our DNA to that consciousness is to immerse ourselves in that consciousness. And that's what we'll do. We'll immerse ourselves in it. It's what we'll listen to it all the time. We'll read about it all the time. Anything higher consciousness. It might not be the highest of the high. You might go back to it later and go, oh, that's so human. I can't believe I read that. But at the time, it's big for you. At the time, it's a big deal. It's unlocking the DNA. It's unlocking the ancient memories. It's unlocking so much of where you're trying to go, and it's massive. But sometimes that can be tough to be in a house like that, and you're like, oh, now the vibration of the house is high, and I need to get out for a while. And you go outside, and it's kind of fucked up out there, and I don't really want to be out there either, and I'm going to try to go back. I don't know where I want to be. It reminds me very much of, sometimes when we first go to college or first move away from home, and you go back home, and it doesn't feel like home, but you go to college, and that doesn't feel right either. You're in this flux phase where neither one feels right. And that's when you kind of are in that middle, to me, of that fourth dimension, that middle consciousness, because you do have different consciousness in the different dimensions. And I really see that a lot in the fourth dimension. To me, there's a vast area there when you first go in, when you first start to go out, of the consciousness there. And you can see it when you meet someone else in the fourth dimension, but they're at a totally different consciousness because they're in the beginning and you're at the end, or you're in the beginning and they're at the end. And it's just a really big playground there, to play. And it can feel overwhelming, and you can feel like, oh, I just feel like I'm never going to get out of here. And I don't even know where I want to be or what I want to do. And I feel so uncomfortable inside myself, right? And that's a big one. You just don't feel, you feel agitated. You're clearing agitation. You're clearing anger. You're clearing all this stuff. And you're watching everybody else go on with their human life because it's not their time to do it yet. And then that pisses you off because you're kind of in this limbo of not knowing what you want to do, and you don't feel comfortable anywhere, and everything you used to like, you don't like anymore. And they're going on with their human life and having a great time, and it makes you mad. You get pissed. You're like, well, what the fuck, Or you see people in a different part of their journey where they've kind of gone past that point, and they're in this bliss and magic part, and you're not in that part yet. And then you see other people in a totally different part of their journey, and you don't really understand what they're talking about. And they're saying it's tough, and you think it's tough because of where you're at, because it's tough where you're at, and they're saying it's tough where they're at, and then you have someone in the middle saying it's just glorious. And you're like, which one is it? Is it glorious? Is it sucky? Which one is it? And it's all of it. It is every part of it. It's every moment of your journey is going to be, I'm in this phase, and it's kind of rough because I'm doing this internal alignment. And that internal alignment continues to fine tune as you go. And then when you get into the fifth dimension, you just have reached this, you've gone deep enough in yourself, you've reached this bliss and magic in yourself, and your eyes look lighter. That was the one thing I remember someone would say to me, is like, your eyes were lighter. You go in a room and you just attract more people because your vibration's higher. You have a different aura to you. You have a different, you just have a different aura. I don't really like the word aura, but I'm going to use it. I never use that word, but I'm going to use it here. You have a different aura to you. You're just different. You're not a human frequency anymore. You kind of come through this shift and this internal shift and internal change. And you stay in this fifth dimensional bliss and magic, and your voice is kind of sweeter and higher, and everything is love and light and peace. And it's just like this, it's like the 1960s hippie phase of ascension. I don't know another way to put it. That's what it feels like. It is just this beautiful moment when you connected with yourself and you filled up your cup in a sense, and your light cup is full, and you might still not be able to hold it around a lot of people, but when you're by yourself and you're in nature, you just feel this sense of peace that you can't, it's no words to explain it. There's nothing that's going to explain that to you till you experience it. And we have a lot of relationships along the way that help us feel that, because if we've never felt it, we don't know there's something to get back to, We just like to attach it to the thing and saying the thing made me feel that way. It just unlocked that, how you felt inside, because all that stuff is inside. We talk about junk DNA on this channel a lot, and how they say it's not used for anything. There's so much encoded in that junk DNA, but human consciousness doesn't understand what it's for, so it says it's junk. It's galactic DNA in there. There's higher aspect DNA in there. There's ancient memory DNA in there. There's a lot going on in that DNA, and it's not junk. And that's what we're unlocking and unraveling. So you get to this next phase where you've been in this bliss and magic, and it's time now to kind of look around and what do I now need to go do. And you can start getting a little bored with this phase toward the end. I remember I got a little bored because I'm like, I really want to go do something, and I don't even know what it is, but I want to go out and do something more. And you might be called to work more with the collectives at that point, or you might not be. You're still in a kind of an infancy stage in it. You're kind of enjoying your divine inner child and just playing around a little bit. And then you get to this phase where you feel like the rug has come out from under you, and you don't understand why. You don't understand why all of a sudden either you lose your job, or you have to move from your house, or everything starts unraveling. And what starts to happen is your outside world is starting to align to your new frequency, because you've held that frequency long enough to now you're starting to see your outside world align to it. But the outside world doesn't align how we think it would align. Like all of a sudden you open the door and there are unicorns and puppies out there and infinite bags of money, and you just walk off into a rainbow of bliss and magic. That's what we think is going to happen. And there's some channels that might tell you that's what's going to happen, but I'm telling you, that's not what's going to happen. Because now we have to align everything in our world to that frequency, and everything that is not that frequency has to go. And for 9 out of 10 of us, it's how we made our money, how we looked at money. We haven't even embraced these concepts yet when we're just doing our internal alignment. We haven't embraced our program with money, our program with people. Am I a people pleaser? Do I not really like myself very much? We haven't seen how it's reflected back to us in the outer world. Our narcissistic realities, we haven't made the connection until it starts getting super loud, and the realities start kind of screaming back at us because we haven't aligned them. So there are going to be some you're going to be shown to align, and you'll try to figure out how to do that. And most of the time it's leaving them, closing them out in the highest possible place, and then trying to just, exit, close them down. Some you won't know how to do it yet, and you kind of put a pin in it and just walk away and know I'm going to have to come back to it. Maybe it won't be this exact same person, but at some point this is going to repeat, and I'm going to have to be able to close it out. And that's when everything starts to unravel. And that's when you get people who are in this place where their whole world's falling apart and they don't understand because they've done all this internal work. They've done all this and they're ready for this big shift. I know, I felt the same way. They're ready for this big shift into this awesomeness, and you get kind of kaplunked into what feels like the fifth abyss of hell, and you don't understand why. Because everything we created, we now have to kind of close up, deconstruct. Why did I create it? Purge the program within our DNA that we've been unlocking while we've been doing all this internal work. We didn't realize we were unlocking it, but we were. It's kind of like that scene in Inside Out 2 when they get to this deep, dark secret, and then the little, I don't know, the little animated characters like, not now. Yeah, I'll tell you later what I am. And that's kind of what happens. We get into these deep, dark places within ourselves, and we have to reconcile all those things. How did I create this? Why is this person in my life? All these people are aspects of me. Which ones are they? Why are you still here? You know, how can I have people in my life that are totally selfish when I feel like I'm not like that anymore? Why are you even still in my life? I don't understand how you're even here anymore. It's just crazy. And that's when we start having to align our outer world. You know, your car might go because we don't really appreciate things the same way. We get stripped of everything. You get stripped of who you thought you were externally, because you now have the internal strength to deal with that. And even though we won't feel like we do, we will. And you'll be able to see when the universe is throwing you a bone and showing you to go this way, because now you're listening to those subtle things. You might feel like you're having a really rough time of everything collapsing at one time. And normally it's right before everything seems to be lining up. And then, you know, everything then starts to kind of to fall apart. Because we're different now. We can't exist in that reality anymore, because now our frequency's too high for that reality. So it has to all go away. And every program attached to that reality has to be explored and dissected and transcended. So we're not creating another reality based on that same stuff. And we'll go through periods of this and loops of this over and over and over again. Because a lot of times when we start trying to recreate a reality, we watch one go, we're trying to get another one created, and we can't have one come in while we're still experiencing the other one. We have to completely button that one up. That's why we get these transitionary, temporary realities in a sense, where you might do something for 2 months or 3 months just to kind of bridge a gap for you. And you'll know you're just bridging a gap so the next reality can come in, because you can't be experiencing one frequency and bring in another frequency. You know, it doesn't work that way, because you have to be completely out of that frequency. We have to have a reset of the realities in a sense. We have to be out of it long enough so our vibration can really start to hum at that higher frequency, because all that other stuff kind of keeps us pulled down in it. And that's the part we don't like. And that's the part people don't want to talk about, because they feel like when we talk about it, it feels like, oh, we failed at something, right? Because it's not turning out what I thought it was going to look like. Because our lens is in the beginning based on a human reality. What is human success? What is human, victory? You know, what does that look like? And when our reality stopped looking like that, we feel our own judgment for it, and in turn we get attracting that judgment from the outside world, because now all of a sudden we feel like we failed in all these things, because we just really have not understood why it's happening. And it can take years to kind of really start to unpack that after reality fails and you start to see the pattern. And you won't usually see the pattern until you're very much removed from the reality. And the more removed from the reality that you are, you'll start to be able to see it, because you can only align a reality from higher consciousness. You know, you can look down on it and see what's going on. And usually by the time you start to understand the program and how this whole thing got created, you're moving out of the reality. And that's because you have now that consciousness to see it, which means you've transcended enough of the program to not be living from the program anymore. You're kind of bearing witness to seeing how it got started. And if you try to slip back into that program, you're now starting to reprogram. You know, you're not so much reprogramming internally anymore. I mean, in a way you are. But you're making sure you're not going into the same thing again. Because in our human consciousness, we would just loop around that shit like a roller coaster over and over again. You know, maybe different people, maybe the same damn people, and we would just keep looping and looping and looping and looping, because anytime we made a decision based on that program, we would now go on this sort of scenic route, right? And we would start to purge. We'd go through all these experiences to purge the program of why we made that original choice to go the way we went. And then we get back around again and we'll be faced with that same decision again in one capacity or the other. And we'll either make the same choice again and go through another scenic route. That's why it takes so long to raise our vibration in our human consciousness, because we're going the scenic route. You know, we're not even understanding why we're making choices. We think we have free will, understanding we don't have any free will. We're programmed to do all these things, and we just do A, B, C, and D. This is what we're programmed to do. This is what success looks like. This is what failure looks like. And if these realities don't look that way, I've done something wrong. And we have a lot of that, and we start realigning our world of I've done something wrong, because this is not what I thought it would be. You know, this is not how I thought this was supposed to work out. This is kind of off the rails. So whether you are in your internal phase, and you're going to go through a lot of years where you're internal than external more, you know. You'll have not a lot happening in your reality for a couple years. You might upgrade your space a little bit here and there, but you're not seeing huge shifts in your frequency. You'll notice little shifts year by year. I still notice them more in linear years, even though the linear pattern's different. Like I'll know in August what's going to start happening, and by October, and then I'll maybe have boots on the ground by March or April the next year. But in the old days, I couldn't see that, but I could see, okay, there's a little shift. Like that year, I knew my space needed to be painted, or I needed new rugs, or I needed to do all this stuff, because I had to keep the vibration of the space higher to support my new vibration. So you start to notice kind of nuances in it. So those are, to me, more the years when we go back internal. We start working more on inside again. We're trying to get our vibration up again, more and more and more. We're getting our vibration higher, and then everything starts to fall apart again. And there are easier ways for it to go, and sometimes there's harsher ways. And usually the harsher ways, the realities start to fall away, we learn because we're holding on to them. You can look back at some of the ones that maybe start to collapse on you before, and you're like, oh God, I don't understand what's happening. But I can look back at this now and go, oh, I know what I did. I know why that collapsed. I didn't listen. I didn't align how I needed to align in the moment, so my universe collapsed it for me, because it's going to hold us back. So it kind of slapped me upside the face, because I really wouldn't listen on what I needed to do. I didn't want to. I didn't want to leave that reality. There was still something in it, was some kind of comfort in it. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to, because I didn't know what the next one was going to be. And a lot of times we don't see the next one. And a lot of times it's not going to look the way we want it to look. It's not going to come from the person you want it to come from. It's going to come from someone totally different. And it's not going to be what we wanted it to be from our human standards. But when we get into reality, we're like, oh my God, this is awesome. I can't believe I didn't want to come do this, So you can have periods of more internal, and then bigger shift in the external world some years. And some years you'll notice little shifts in the external. People might drop away for a few years. People might come back. People might never come back. But you'll start to see the shifts and the kind of the ebbs and the flows of it. All right, I'm going to check the chat. It's a little bit longer. Hello. Okay, I don't have questions. I'll give it a minute, because sometimes there is a bit of delay here if I have any questions, but I'm probably going to end it there. I don't want to go too long. These get too long, it's harder to post on a couple of the sites, and I do want kind of this information to be out there if anybody wants to, when somebody, it's time for them to find it. So, okay, let me see if there's anything else I can throw in. We really want to try, don't judge what's happening in your external reality, unless you are really holding on to it so tight, it's getting pried out of your hands. And then you still don't want to judge yourself for that. You just want to realize you're the one making it hard. You're the one that's holding on to it when nobody else is. And I've had a lot of realities like that too, where I'm the one holding on to it, and I'm the only one in here holding on to it, trying to, like when a tent starts to pull up out of the ground, and you got this one pole, and you're just trying to get it in the ground, and everyone else is standing around and letting it just go, but you're just trying to keep it there. But you look around and realize, well, I'm the only one that gives a shit. Why do I care? Nobody else seems to care here. And it's not so much in that moment. It's true, they don't care. They don't care about it because they don't even understand why they're in the reality yet. And they might not know for years later. And if you're the only one trying to hold that tent down, baby, let it go. Let the tent go. Because when you're the only one trying to hold it down, it becomes very clear that it's time to let it go. Because there are going to be a lot of realities you're going to shoulder. And you know you're supposed to shoulder them, right? But there comes a time when it starts to collapse and your universe is not having anything to help you hold it up. You're not getting the energy. Energy can come as money. It can come as time, whatever. And all of a sudden, you don't have any of that anymore. You can't hold this reality up. And no one else is willing to step in and assist you in holding it up. We're holding on to it. And we're the only ones that care. And from someone who's been the only one that's cared in reality for like a super long time, you'll know when it's done. And it is sometimes you got to look at the program as to why. Why do I want this to hold so hard? Why do I not want to let this one go? So, all right, we're going to leave it there. Okay, I'll see everyone next time.